Welcome to the Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. My name is Ward Simmons. I'm one of 7 Dharma leaders that rotate responsibility for leading our offerings. Let me say that because it is summertime and the air conditioner is running, there's more noise here in the room than there used to be. And I'm supposed to be using a microphone tonight, but between the challenges of getting Zoom going and leading the instruction period, I didn't accomplish that. So if you can't hear me, please raise your hand and feel free to move toward the front if that would help what you can hear. Clyde, did you raise your hand? Would you like to move toward the front? I will try to speak up, and if I lose my focus on speaking up, please remind me. So tonight I want to talk about spiritual retreat, and I want to say 2 things about it before I begin the talk. The first thing I want to say is this is not a sales pitch. This Sangha has a retreat coming up in September, and I encourage you to go to that, and I'm not being sneaky about that. But I'm mentioning that the Sangha breaks even on the retreat. So there's no incentive for the Sangha to persuade people to come, except that we and I think retreat practice is very important. And that's why I'm giving this talk tonight. The second thing I want to say is that this is just my point of view. I'm going to tell you about my experience on retreat. Other teachers would tell you other things. So this is the Buddha, the Pali term that the Buddha used was ehipassiko, come and see for yourself. This is what I have found, and I invite you to see for yourself. So over the past couple years, you probably have not heard as much about residential meditation retreats. And that's because due to COVID-19, they really haven't been available. All the retreats were discontinued, shut down for a couple of years. And now that retreats are once again becoming available, COVID-19 is somewhat waning and retreats are again available. I think it's important for us to keep this in mind. So my talk is designed to encourage you to make retreat practice a part of your practice. And it's mostly oriented to those of you who have little or no retreat on residential retreats, but I hope that there's something useful in here for everyone. The practice of going on retreat is a part of every spiritual tradition. The idea of taking a sabbatical is akin to retreat, setting aside time away from our daily responsibilities to reflect and contemplate. And to me, looking at the Christian tradition, the 40 days that Jesus wandered in the wilderness would have much in common with a self-retreat. So everyone's experience of meditation practice is different, but for many people, there's a natural progression. Maybe we hear a talk or we read a book and that piques our interest. And then we go to a meeting, like a meeting of this Sangha, and we find that satisfying and we start attending. And then gradually we develop a home meditation practice. Maybe we sign up for some classes or series or discussion groups, and then begin a home study practice, reading books and listening to recorded talks. Maybe we experiment with half-day or day-long retreats, and a residential retreat is the next natural step in that progression. Now, I want to make an important distinction. I'm talking here about silent residential meditation retreats. And that does not include all meditation retreats. So in some traditions, the retreats include discussion groups, journaling, group singing, a variety of activities. And if you find these useful, I'm not trying to discourage you from those retreats, but the important point is not to confuse them with retreats held in silence. The benefits from deep silence in a retreat cannot be achieved, in my opinion, without the silence. So silent residential retreats are an invaluable addition to meditation practice. Philip Moffitt, a well-known insight meditation teacher, says, silent residential meditation retreats are the best way to learn mindfulness meditation, even for those who already have other meditation practices. So notice he didn't say they're a good way, and he didn't say they're one of the best ways. He said they are the best way. And I happen to agree with that. Now, let me be clear. Some of you won't choose to do a residential retreat right now in your practice. I'm not saying that means your practice can't be very beneficial. I'm just saying that a residential retreat, a silent retreat, is an opportunity to move to a deeper level that I believe you can't achieve without that. So I want to talk briefly about what the benefits of a silent retreat are, what you might expect, and how to choose a retreat. So there are a lot of reasons we might choose to go on retreat. One is we demonstrate a commitment to our practice. We make real our devotion by setting aside time, some part of our limited time and our limited money, and use them to explore and strengthen our practice. It's like when we demonstrate our commitment to our family by blocking out time for family experiences together. Or we undertake a service project with an organization that we believe in. It's a statement that we value something enough to invest in. A second reason to go on retreat is to gain different perspectives on meditation. Each teacher has a point of view to offer. And hearing a variety of perspectives enables us to develop our own understanding of the Dhamma. Different teachers will choose different teachings as their focus, and having exposure to a variety of teachers brings with it exposure to a variety of teachings. Another reason to go on retreat is that it can be inspiring. It can give us a boost of energy around the practice. All meditators experience times when the practice becomes dry and stale. A dedicated block of time with a skilled teacher can provide a shot in the arm, refreshing our commitment and sustaining us long beyond the end of the retreat. Finally, and maybe most importantly, longer periods for quiet reflection are essential for the arising of insight. We practice insight meditation, and the insights we seek can be elusive to talk about, let alone to experience. With many things in practice, we can just make a decision and undertake them. So if we're working on right speech, for example, or right effort, we can choose to practice these in every moment. But insight is different. We can't sit down and say, now I will have an insight. It doesn't work that way. All we can do is prepare our minds and hearts and make ourselves available. Insight arises on its own schedule. Again, Philip Moffitt likes to say that all we can do is place ourselves outside the gate and wait, but we can't control when the gate opens. The extended periods of quiet and solitude in retreat practice represent our commitment to making ourselves available for the arising of insight. So that's a little bit about the benefits. What might we expect on retreat? In the Metta Sutta, the Buddha refers to one of the qualities of the devoted practitioner as being unburdened by duties. Doesn't that sound delightful? Unburdened by duties. Silent residential meditation retreats attempt to create the environment of being unburdened by duties. The participant is relieved of virtually all decision-making and relieved of monitoring time. Someone else has already prepared the schedule of when you will meditate and when you will eat, when you will sleep. And if you don't like it, that's too bad. You have to follow the schedule or leave the retreat. There's no need to wear a watch because the sound of the bell is all you need to know to tell you that one activity is ending and another one is beginning. Electronic devices have been left behind for the duration of the retreat. Now, when you go on retreat, you'll hear much said about expectations. You will hear that you should arrive with no expectations, and there is truth in that statement. Expectations can easily manifest as clinging and grasping. So maybe I want an excellent experience, but what I got was only a good one. So now I'm disappointed. Or I wanted a talk on the 5 aggregates of clinging, but the teacher didn't talk about that. So now I feel cheated. Or I wanted this delicious peanut soup that everybody says they serve at the retreat center, but it wasn't served. So in spite of the fact that the food was delicious, I'm not satisfied. Going into a retreat without expectations leaves all possibilities open. You may be familiar with the quote, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's, there are few." Leaving behind our expectations open many possibilities that might otherwise be overlooked. Yet, it is also true that there are some things that probably can be expected. So I want to talk about a few of those. If going on a residential retreat seems unfamiliar, intimidating, maybe it will help to know a little bit what you might expect. The day usually begins early with the first meditation period at around 7 o'clock. And most of the day is devoted to alternating periods of sitting meditation and walking meditation. Usually those periods will last between 30 and 45 minutes. The meals will usually be vegetarian. They're usually served buffet style, and they're in silence because you're in noble silence for the whole retreat. There's often an instruction period during the day where the teacher gives you specific instructions on how she or he wants you to practice that day. And at the end of that instruction period, there's usually time for a few questions about the instructions or about your experience. It's not unusual for one of the daily meditation periods to be devoted to metta or loving kindness practice, where the teacher will lead guided meditation. There will usually be a daily Dharma talk where the teacher will spend 45 minutes to an hour speaking on some element of the Dharma. And the talks will usually progress throughout the retreat so that they are kind of progressing the topic that is stated for the retreat, the title of the retreat. And at the end of the evening, most times, the meditation hall is open and you can meditate as much as you like. You can get up in the middle of the night and go meditate. And those can be very productive meditation periods that happen in oddball hours like that. So one of the benefits of retreat is the opportunity to more carefully observe how the mind operates. And when we reduce the flood we normally have of incoming stimulation, the remaining experiences are more clear and accessible. And when we observe how the mind operates in this careful way, then it can inform our understanding of how the mind operates in our daily lives. Because you will be in noble silence, you will not be reading or writing or speaking with other retreatants. If there's something pressing, you can communicate that usually through a handwritten note on the bulletin board to the teacher or to the staff. And depending on how long the retreat is, there will usually be an individual or a small group practice discussion meeting with the teacher. This is not breaking noble silence. This is in the spirit of noble silence. And when that ends, you don't speak any further. If you're like most people, you can expect to have moments when you feel elated, as well as those when you feel sad or frustrated or bored. I often notice how clear and crisp my perceptions are when I leave the meditation hall. The songs of birds are more brilliant, the sky is a deeper blue, and the rain is wetter. When the senses have been given a respite from the constant bombardment of our daily lives, each moment of sense experience is that much more intense. You may have insights that you believe will change you forever, and maybe they will. Some insights you will remember, while others will be quickly forgotten. But don't assume that just because you can't recite what went on, that it hasn't impacted you. Insights can result in basic changes to our understanding that we can't necessarily articulate in the moment. Change in our practice comes slowly, more of an evolution than a revolution, and you will remember what you need to. When you leave the retreat, you will most likely feel much calmer and more centered, and you may find yourself attached to this. In my first few years of going on retreat, it was common for tears to come when the teacher would begin to discuss the approaching end of the retreat. I didn't want the retreat to end. I was so happy in the silence. After it ends, you will find that some or all of this tranquility will slip away. And again, don't presume that there isn't a residual impact, although it may not be clear to you. Another thing that I learned, this is not going to be true of everybody, but it was very useful for me, is this cyclical pattern that I often go through on retreat. I will often practice with great diligence to the point of over-efforting, working too hard, not striking an appropriate balance. And then I'll get frustrated, and that frustration will kind of rise to a crescendo, and then I'll dissolve into tears, and then it'll all start over again. And over time, I've begun to see that there is a cycle to it, and I can kind of interrupt that, and I know what's happening, and I can change my level of effort. And as you practice on retreat, you'll begin to see for yourself certain patterns and how to use retreat skillfully. One final suggestion I'll make about this is, if you're able, when you arrange your retreat, try to set aside an extra day before and after the retreat. The time before will help assure that you arrive rested and ready, and the time after will allow you time for reflection and processing. So that's a little bit about what you might expect based on my experience. So the last thing I want to address is, how do you choose a retreat? So let's say you've decided you want to go on retreat. Now what? Where should you go? What teacher should you choose? What length of time? Making a commitment to go is only the beginning. So I remember the anxiety I had around my first residential retreat. There were so many unknowns. It was so unfamiliar. The facility, was I going to be able to find my way there in my car? Who was this teacher I had signed up with? Who else was going to be there? What was the food going to be like? And for most of us, lack of familiarity creates anxiety. So my suggestion is choose a retreat that's in the tradition you're familiar with. There will be enough unknowns, and your first residential retreat is not the time to introduce some dramatic new teaching or practice. Save the drama for later, once you have some experience being on retreat. When you're choosing, you're going to find most retreats that are available to us are either in our tradition, Insight or Vipassana, or Zen or Tibetan. And if Insight is what you're familiar with, my suggestion is choose an Insight retreat. I'm not saying that you shouldn't go on a Zen or a Tibetan retreat, but I wouldn't begin my practice in a tradition that I'm not familiar with. So what about choosing a teacher? How can you get a sense of someone's style from this brief description on the website? One way is to listen to recorded talks to get a sense of whether you resonate with them or not. Many of you are familiar with Dharma Seed, which is a collection of literally thousands of Dharma talks, recorded Dharma talks. Also, if you're considering a teacher, almost every teacher is affiliated either with a Sangha like ours or a retreat center. And so you can go to those websites and hear recorded talks. And finally, the teachers and the members in your own Sangha will have experience, and they can help you think through that. A word about teachers, it's important to keep in mind that every teacher has their strengths and weaknesses. Some personalities or approaches will be very compatible with your needs. Others will be less so. And even if you don't resonate with the teachings that are being offered, who knows what profound benefit the person sitting beside you is deriving. It is understood to be a serious transgression to criticize anyone who's devoting themselves to sharing the Dhamma. Instead, we should simply take what is useful and leave the rest. How do you decide where to go? There are many good choices, but they break down into basically three options: local sanghas that sponsor retreats at rented facilities, retreat centers that are staffed by lay people, and then monasteries that are the homes of monastic communities. Monasteries can be a great place to retreat, but the experience is likely to be very unfamiliar. My suggestion is that you save that for once you have some experience with retreat. As to retreat centers, The benefit is they have a permanent facility of their own, and they have dedicated staff that are accustomed to operating retreats. And they are also likely to attract well-known teachers. The downside is they're often far away and more expensive. Retreats offered by local sanghas are the most accessible and affordable, but they involve using rented facilities and temporary volunteers, so they're more prone to have some hiccups. And finally, what about a topic? When you research the retreats that you have available to you, you will see some that focus on metta practice or concentration or awareness or a particular teaching from the suttas. My suggestion would be choose one that's designed for relatively new retreatants. Once you have some familiarity with being on retreat, then you will want to begin to target more the topics that you're choosing. And when in doubt, always go for a retreat that has the most silent practice. So in conclusion, it is a great time to practice at a residential retreat. Those of us in the Charlotte Sangha are fortunate that we have a retreat coming up this fall. That'll be September 29th through October 2nd, and there's still several slots available. The registration is open now. Southern Dharma Retreat Center is near Asheville, and they regularly bring in a wide variety of known and respected teachers. I'd like to close with a quote from David Cooper. His book is Silence, Simplicity, and Solitude, A Complete Guide to Spiritual Retreat. He says, "The days begin early. I sit quietly in meditation. I sit again. An observer peeking through the window might think, he is doing nothing at all. He must be terribly bored. What a waste of time. Inside this world, the experience is just the opposite. It is true that there are times filled with boredom, yet there are also periods filled with light when everything seems exquisite and nothing is trivial. At those times, when I do something as simple as moving my arm, I am often amazed. I gaze at an ant moving across the floor. It is fascinating. The universe is so extraordinary. I wonder why most of us spend our lives in a way that ignores the nature of creation. If I were able to look out the window upon the world of busy people, the thought might arise, they are doing and appreciating so little, they must be terribly bored."